I drink Dr. Pepper, don't you see? 'Cause it's the perfect taste for me. That original taste, you know, is making peppers everywhere I go. There's boating peppers, toting peppers, cooking peppers, good-looking peppers. Wouldn't you like to be a pepper too? Us peppers are an interesting breed. An original taste is what we need. Ask any pepper and he'll say.
Good morning. Thank you for spending your Saturday morning with us. I'm Leanna Schooley. I'm Assistant Director of the Center for Texas Studies, and you are here for our Community Heritage Workshop Series, which we do in conjunction with the library on the first Saturday of every month from January until May and from September until December. We keep a schedule on our website, www.texasstudies.com. If you would like to check out our future programming, you can find it there. Also, if you did not put your email address on the sign-in sheet, but you would like to receive our monthly email blasts about upcoming programs, you can be sure and leave it with us before you go, and we'll add you to the list. Today's program, Collecting Pop Culture, is going to teach us a little bit about taking care of all kinds of collections, whether they're metal or glass or paper or textiles, but we're going to learn about it through the Dr. Pepper Museum's collection, and so you'll get a little bit of a kind of inside scoop on how the museum handles all of their materials. We're able to bring you this program through a generous grant from the Summer-Smith Foundation that have continually provided great support for us over the years. Our speaker today is Joyce Summar-Smith. She's a longtime employee of the Dr. Pepper Museum and is currently the Associate Director there. And she oversees all the programs, exhibits, and so on. And she's also an adjunct professor in museum studies for Baylor University. Now, her able assistant today is the museum's exhibit manager, Gabe Schooley, who is also my dear husband. So with that, I will let Joy take over the show, and thank you for being here.
One of the questions that I seem to get asked very frequently as an employee of the Dr. Pepper Museum is, what's your favorite soft drink? And I quite honestly do answer Dr. Pepper, and they go, no, come on, really, what's your favorite soft drink? Well, it's Dr. Pepper. Even growing up as a Tennessean, I have enjoyed Dr. Pepper for many years. Even though I did grow up calling the whole entire soft drink industry a Coke, Dr. Pepper has been really my favorite soft drink. And so to be able to work at the Dr. Pepper Museum and learn a lot about its history has really been an enjoyable time for me. I have enjoyed the many different things that I've gotten to do there. Collections now being a very small part of my job there. But I started off working in the archives hands-on with all the papers that come through, and then getting to spend some time because of that in the collection also. So getting ready for the presentation here was really pretty great for me because I got to go back and spend some more time in our collection looking at things that have come in over the past few years that, since my daily job doesn't put me back there, was really a fun time going through pulling these pieces that we brought for you to see. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. I want to tell you a little bit about the museum itself so that you have an idea of who we are and what we do. We're all about Dr. Pepper in Waco because that's where it was invented in 1885 on the corner of 4th and Austin Avenue. The Old Corner Drugstore is where it all started. Those 23 different flavors were blended together by Dr. Charles Alderton. His boss, Wade Morrison, was the one that actually put the name to the drink. It had originally been called a Waco until Mr. Morrison named it Dr. Pepper. So in 1906, the building that we are in was built The Artesian Manufacturing and Bottling Company was its original name. Now it is on the National Register for Historic Places. And today we do a wide variety of things. We are a private, nonprofit organization. We opened to the public in May of 1991 and have since then attracted over 1 million visitors. We do receive a generous support from Dr. Pepper Snapple Group and many other soft drink bottlers across the country, but we are not owned or operated by them. What that means is I have to buy my Dr. Pepper too. In 2001, if you look on further down the street in this picture, you're going to see a building that has a Dr. Pepper sign on it. We purchased that building called the Kellum Rotan building from the Caritas organization, a food pantry located in Waco, and have been renovating that building to expand our facilities, to grow our collection, to expand our exhibits, to give us more programming space, and expand upon our retail services. We are currently working on exhibits to include a simulated bottling line. If you have questions about how that happens, ask Gabe. We will be including the Big Red story. It is the other soft drink that was invented in Waco in 1937. And expanding upon our transportation exhibit for this building. Now, the museum is also home to the W.W. Foots Clements Free Enterprise Institute, and that is where our educational arm of our organization comes in. It was created for the purpose of educating children as well as adults about the free enterprise economic system, using the soft drink industry as a model for developing, producing, and marketing products. We are recognized as the only nonprofit museum in the country dedicated to the entire soft drink industry. So if you come to the museum, you are going to find things about Coke and Pepsi and a lot of other soft drinks out there. At the time that we opened to the public, the museum's collection of artifacts totaled approximately 1,600 objects. Today, our collection includes over 100,000 artifacts, many of which are on loan to us by Dr. Pepper Snapple Group. So a little bit about some fun things that we've got going on over the next few months, so that if you ever make it down to Waco in the next few weeks, you'll know what to expect and to do. Next week, we're gearing up for the 1024 Collectors Club. It is Thursday, March the 7th through Saturday, March the 9th. Waco will be invaded by hundreds of fanatical Dr. Pepper collectors. It's a lot of fun. They do have a swap meet on next Saturday from 10 to 3, which is a lot of fun many times. We also will be having some special promotions for the month of March. Revolving around the idea of going green. With St. Patty's Day, we're instituting Wear Green on St. Patty's Day, and you'll get in for free, and a recycling program working with Keep Waco Beautiful. Also this year, we will have an exhibit dedicated to the 60th anniversary of the Waco tornado. That is in memory of the F5 tornado that struck the downtown Waco area on May the 11th, 1953. As always, you can keep up with us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, our website, lots of things going on that way. So, got through that part. Let's get on to the actual program. At the Dr. Pepper Museum, we have been charged with the protection, that's why I brought Gabe that part, and the preservation of our collection. You likewise have the same responsibility for your own collection. So first of all, let's go through some things that you need to do to protect your collection and keep it safe. And some things to guard against are things we call the agents of deterioration. Water, light, humidity, temperature, pests, air pollution, and even yourself, myself, and other people around you can be problems for your collection. So, a little bit about those agents. Water. If you've ever had a broken pipe or suffered through a fire, you know all about the damage that water can do. Water on your objects can make the colors bleed on your papers, warping and wrinkling of the paper, and then that can lead to discoloration. The image here shows the dangers that water can do, the things that water can do to paper. And yes, if you have a water problem, there are chances that there will be a fungus among us. Mold reproduces via spores that are released into the air. They require moisture to survive, so if your paper objects and other things do get wet, please be sure to dry them out as quickly as possible to prevent further growth. Some things to remember is don't store things in basements or your bathroom. Moisture tends to collect there and can lead to these types of damage. Now, we all know what the sunlight can do to our skin, but incandescent and fluorescent lights can also be problems for our precious collectibles. Ordinary light bulbs can fade fabrics, textiles, paper, leathers, paint, and wood. The damage that is done is cumulative. Removing the object from the sun will not correct or lessen the damage. What is done is done. Objects should be stored away from the light, and even for framed pieces you have hanging in your house, a simple UV filter on the glass can do wonders to help protect it for the future. That other agent of deterioration, humidity. We are many times aware that hotter air holds less humidity, and that high humidity can lead to mold growth, which is another excellent reason not to store things in your basement or your bathroom. High humidity is a leading contributor to the corrosion of metal. A temperature set at 72 degrees Fahrenheit that has about 30% to 50% humidity is a good way in which to store your objects. If you fear high humidity, silica gel or beads in your storage boxes can always be used to help protect against it. And I've discovered that these are many times very easy to locate nowadays, especially if you're like me and have a massive shoe collection or handbag collection. They tend to come in those particular things and can really help you out in making sure that you're taking care of the humidity problems. Mold, gross. Temperature. Swelling and contracting with fluctuating temperatures over time can lead to cracks and breaks in an object. Elevated temperatures can speed the chemical process of aging. As I said before, 72 degrees is a happy medium for people many times and for your objects. Although Gabe will attest, many times I'm not a happy camper at 72 degrees. I'm frequently found huddled in my office in a coat and hat, even at 72 degrees. So to avoid dealing with this particular agent of deterioration, avoid the barn, avoid the shed, and the garage for storing your objects. These places are not your friends because of the fluctuating temperatures there. Pests. We all hate to hear the word, ooh, there's a bug. This particular little pest is a silverfish. They are white to brown gray or bluish silver in color. They have this teardrop shape that you see here and have those three long bristles on their rear end. They are capable of thriving almost anywhere, but they really do love those dark, damp places in your basements, maybe your attic or your bathroom. Commonly found in boxes, in garages, in sheds. They feed on carbohydrates. They are especially attracted to paper and clothing. They often ruin papers and wallpaper. They like anything cellulose. They even love the glue that's found in your books. And being nocturnal, they many times can move in quickly and grow in places that we just simply aren't aware. One of the best ways to prevent this kind of infestation is to control your humidity and make sure that you're not leaving foods that they enjoy out in places that they may hide. If you come across an infestation, your best friend's probably going to be an exterminator, because most do-it-yourself remedies just really aren't as effective as we would like them to be. Another pest. There we go. Rats and mice. Unfortunately, this is something that we're intimately aware of at the museum. We had one arrive in a donation last year. And since this donation was rather large, it took us a while to go through it. And in fact, we're still going through it to process it into our collection. But before we knew it, this little guy had chewed through several boxes. We discovered he liked chocolate. We had a donation come in of some chocolate bottles that were probably about this big, and he really did enjoy those. We spent some time trying to locate him and trap him on our own, but eventually did have to call a professional exterminator. Which, did the professional exterminator even find him?
I think so.
Okay. At least we haven't seen anything else happen since then. But rats and mice. Another pest to be aware of is the powder post beetle. From this picture, you can see that they have two jointed clubs for their antennae. They love deciduous trees. They can very effectively reduce it to a powder of dust. They spend months in the larvae stage living inside the wood, feeding mainly on the starch content, and then we are only then aware of them as they emerge as adults, leaving behind pinhole-sized openings. Wood preservatives can be used to prevent the beetle infestation, and items that can be infested by powder post beetles include wooden tools or tool handles, frames, furniture, gun stocks, books, toys, bamboo, flooring, and even structural timbers. So they can be hungry little bugs. So once again, your best friend is probably going to be the exterminator. And one last, although this is just the short list of pests, oops. Okay, maybe we're good. Is the dermestid. They are larder beetles, hide or leather beetles, carpet beetles. There are probably about 500 to 700 species of them worldwide. They can range in size from 1 to 12 millimeters, and you can see here some of their characteristics from this particular picture. These bugs are very useful in forensics because they are known to be associated with decaying carcasses, and so they can help with criminal investigations in dating that way. But they can cause extensive damage to natural fibers. They are destructive in a number of common items such as wool, silk, fur, feathers. They aren't, and who would, they don't really enjoy synthetic fibers. They do like chocolate also, and cocoa beans. And they have also been found feeding on the bows of violins and violas because of the natural fibers found in those. So those are just a few of the pests to be aware of, but pests are definitely an agent of deterioration. Air pollution is another one, just simple dust, dirt, and even smoke. We all are aware of what air pollution can do to us, and so it's definitely going to be harmful for our collections. Air pollutants are acidic, they are abrasive, and hygroscopic. They can retain moisture that can do damage that you might not be able to see with your eye, but over time that damage can build up. So store your objects away from air pollutants by putting them in boxes. If you aren't able to store them. Make sure you clean them with a soft, clean, dry cotton cloth to prevent scratching of the dust on the object. And at the museum, we really should own stock in Swiffer. We use them a lot to help clean around the museum, especially as we're getting ready for exhibiting. And then us. What can we do? We can break things. We can misplace things. Hopefully not us, but it has been known to happen. Vandalism and even theft would all fall into the human category. We even have our own horror stories at the museum of things that have happened. I teach the exhibits class and had a number of our students come through our collection to help pull objects for an exhibit, and one person sat a glass down on the edge of a cabinet and walked away, and the next person came along behind, and whoops, the next thing I knew, that glass was bouncing on the concrete. I swear it bounced about 10 times, and I'm just standing there in horror, and it didn't break, but I'm halfway afraid that at some point in time, the train that goes down the track right outside our building, the vibrations from that train is just going to shatter that glass as it sits in its box on the shelf. But there are less extreme stories of what we can do damage-wise. Just the simple dirt and oil on our hands can do damage to the objects. So before you handle anything, be sure you wash your hands. If you have available, cotton gloves are a great way in which to handle your own collection to prevent the transfer of that oil and dirt. There is an exception, though, to wearing gloves. If you're carrying ceramics or glass with gloves, it can be too slippery with the gloves on, and so it's better to go ahead and wash your hands and then carry the object so that you don't take the chance of it slipping out of your hands and maybe not being as lucky as we were with it bouncing 10 times and not breaking. So those are the agents of deterioration to be aware of, especially in your own houses. But let's talk a little bit about what it is that we do and what you can do at home to preserve your objects and keep them in a good preservation status. There are several different levels of caring. There's what you can do at home. There's what we do at the museum, which many times can be accessible to anybody to do. And then there's the professional conservation that we at the museum don't even take on. We call a professional for, and those professionals are available for you to utilize also. And just remember that if you don't know what to do when you come across an issue, call a professional. They can help. And another key thing to remember is to do nothing that is irreversible. You want to be able to undo it if at all possible. And wearing gloves is definitely a good key as you're working with your objects. So let's go on. I'm going to talk about some different categories that we have at the museum, and you'll be able to see some of our collection items as we go through. Ceramics and glass, what can happen to it? Break, hopefully unintentionally caused by you. Be sure that you handle your objects one at a time and with both hands. And this is that exception to the rule with the gloves. Don't wear your gloves. It makes things too slippery, and you're going to increase the chances of dropping something this way. Storage, keep it in a box if you can. Now I know that many of us buy these things so that they can be seen by others. And so as you display them, make sure that they're not right there next to the edge, that they're not going to be accidentally knocked off also. If you are storing them, be sure to find some acid-free tissue paper to store it with. Don't wrap it in newspaper. Newspaper is really acidic and can do more harm to your object that it's wrapping, and can leave stains on ceramics also from the ink on the newsprint. If you need to clean it, wash it. Except for porous ceramics, they can soak up the water, and that's going to do more damage than good. And then just dust it regularly to keep the air pollutants off so that they're not causing damage there. If something tragic happens, rinse it, dry it, clean it. If it breaks, glue the chip back on. If it shatters, call the professionals. They can help you out there. Paper, lots of things. The light can fade it. The water in relative humidity can wrinkle it, warp it, or make it moldy. It can tear or break from your own interaction with it, or just simply being too old and dry. It can break very easily. Wash your hands when handling it. Wear gloves, be gentle. Make sure you're lifting from a very stable portion of it so that you're not pulling it on the corner and having that corner break off in the tip of your fingers. And just simply don't touch it. If you can get away without handling it, that's going to be better for the object in the long run too. Keeping the oils from your hands away from it and not putting stress on it. Keeping it out of light is going to help prevent the fading, so that's a good storage option. You've got appropriate temperatures of 72 with a lower humidity level. If you have newspaper you're wanting to store and to preserve, make sure you're storing those separately from everything because like I said earlier, the acid from the paper is going to do damage also. Display. The best thing to do is not to cause any more damage. You don't want it to be something that's irreversible, so don't put any more holes in it. Put it in a frame if you want to hang it. You can ask for acid-free mat board when you're getting it framed professionally, and that will not cause any more damage. And also the UV filters for the glass will also help prevent some of the fading. If you need to clean it, a white eraser can help clean off a lot of dirt. Make sure it is white. If you use one of the orange ones or a different color one, many times, and you've probably seen it before, they'll leave an orange mark behind, and a white will help. It won't leave that mark behind. When disaster strikes, if it gets wet, take it out of the situation immediately and let it dry. Many times you can sandwich it between wax paper and apply pressure to it, and that will help get out a lot of the wrinkles as it dries. If you aren't sure what to do from there, get professional help. And especially if things are turning to getting moldy. And many times conservators have a way to get the tape and glues off of things that we don't have the ability to do. Metal, it can rust. When it gets wet from water and relative humidity, or in our case, if it's a can of Dr. Pepper, Dr. Pepper being rather acidic on its own, can cause problems with cans that we have in our collection. We can scratch it, air pollutants can scratch it, so wear your cotton gloves. If you don't, metal, it's nice because you can just simply wipe it directly afterwards with your clean, dry cotton cloth too, and that will take care of most of the problems there. Storage, white cotton cloth is a good way to go. Pillowcases can really work well for this particular situation. Make sure it's not in the basement or in the barn or in the garage because you want to keep these things away from the relative humidity a lot. And many times, especially with the items that we have in our collection, and you can see from the top image here, we already have ready-made holes in them, and so we do utilize those to hang them. If you want to cushion the nail so that it's not scratching or however you're holding it, hanging it, cushion it with some of the white cotton cloth or quilt batting or something like that. That can help add another level of protection there to make sure that your hanging device is not scratching it. Framing, once again, is a great way to preserve it. I'll repeat it again. Soft cotton cloth, Great way to clean. Don't use polish. That's going to leave behind other things that don't need to be on the object and can actually cause damage in the long term, even though it might not look like it in the short term. Make sure you dry it out if it gets wet. Paint chips, rusting, you can get professional help to help take care of those things. So, a summary real quick. Don't forget your water, light, humidity, temperature, pests, air pollution in us, unfortunately, can be agents of deterioration. Use acid-free paper, folders, boxes. A lot of those things are available through an online site called Gaylord. They also have a catalog you can order too. And make sure you're keeping track of your humidity and temperature levels. And then investing in some white cotton gloves are a great way to go to for taking care of your collection at home. So now you know how to take care of it. What is it? How old is it? And we'll go through this, and you can learn how to date your own Dr. Pepper objects that you have at home now. So, first logo that you see up at the top here, 1885. It was one of the very first ones used by Mr. Morrison and Dr. Alderton. In 1891, as they incorporated the Artesian Manufacturing and Bottling Company, they approached a local artist in Waco who created this logo, Dr. Pepper's Phosphorates, wheat and iron, touting the health benefits of Dr. Pepper in 1891, good for brain and brawn. By 1905, they had moved on to Dr. Pepper, King of Beverages. They then simply adjusted in around 1925 the King of Beverages for Good for Life, still touting the health benefits. And then you were supposed to drink it at 10, 2, and 4 o'clock for that extra pep in your step to keep you going from meal to meal. I have mine here good to go here shortly. And then in 1934, they dressed it up a little bit with the tile background that you see here. Interestingly enough, it was originally a solid black background until someone accidentally printed the printer's proof that had the tile to it to make sure that the layout was correct in the proportions, and they decided they liked it and went with it. So that was utilized up until about 1950. Now then, Dr. Pepper in 1926 introduced Old Doc, the country doctor, who once again was touting health benefits for Dr. Pepper, and then introduced Pretty Peggy Pepper in the early 1940s. And she went around selling Dr. Pepper. Now, just to show you some interesting ways in which these logos were used and that you might find. These are some advertising newspaper prints from the 1930s. I'm in love with my doctor. Late at night, the Sandman says, okay. By the 1930s, Dr. Pepper did have caffeine in it. I try to avoid it a little, some at that late at night. And then some interesting pieces that show how those logos were utilized not just in newspaper, but on artifacts themselves. In the center, you will find a fan pole on the top, and another fan pole with the Victory Garden lady. And then above her is what's called a shelf talker. You'll see some wide bars across the top of that image, and those were the places where it folded over and set the shelf talker so that it was hanging over the edge of the shelf in the grocery store. So those are just a couple of items that are collectible. Now, in 1950 is when Dr. Pepper's logo underwent a significant change. It was in 1950 that the period is dropped. You can see here from the script that they changed from one that looked very handwritten into a sans serif font. Take a look at what it would have looked like if that period had been in there. Kind of takes on the illusion of D.I. semicolon Pepper. So Dr. Pepper took a little bit of an artistic license and decided to go ahead and drop that doctor because they weren't really in reference to a doctor at all, and it has never been added back in. So here's some advertising that utilized those, that logo in the 1950s. On the top you see what many people refer to as Frosty Dog. He actually did have a name, Boomer. And you can see a later version from the 1970s sitting on our table here today. And then another slogan, A Lift for Life. Now in 1958 is when they began the move to the oval. We call this the bounced logo. And if you take a look at that third P in Pepper, you'll notice that it's slightly elevated from the others. And that was the major change for this one, is that little bounce to the P. In 1960, they added the chevron and also came up with this guy, still keeping in the 10, 2, and 4 idea. Briefly, this Dr. Pepper logo enjoyed some attention. And then a couple of ads. One of important significance that you see here is probably the caveman, who probably looks slightly familiar to everyone. He was created by Johnny Hart, who was the drew the comics BC and the Wizard of Id. So these were some cartoons that he did for Dr. Pepper in the late 1960s. This particular character, his name is Harmon. There was Orville, Bunyan, and Maybelle that joined him on various adventures on commercials and newspaper ads. And if you do make it down to the Collectors Club, you'll be able to enjoy our Executive Director's presentation on Harmon, which I'm sure is going to be very interesting. How many of you have ever had hot Dr. Pepper? A couple of you. Do you enjoy it with a slice of lemon? This idea was promoted heavily by the company in the 1960s. We still do serve it during the winter months at the museum. Either you're going to be a fan of hot Dr. Pepper or you're not. And then also in the early 1960s came along dietetic Dr. Pepper. It was the introduction of Dr. Pepper's first diet product. A lot of other soft drinks introduced diets at this point in time, and dietetic was theirs. They quickly had to change the name. There was a whole lot of confusion about who dietetic Dr. Pepper was for. Because it was dietetic, it sounded like it was for diabetics. And so they quickly changed it to Diet Dr. Pepper. Some of you are probably familiar with the changing name story of their diet drinks, from dietetic to diet to sugar-free to diet, and kind of back and forth and around. It has enjoyed a variety of names until it settled finally at Diet Dr. Pepper again in the 1980s. So I'm a Pepper came about in the late 1970s. I'm a Pepper, you're a Pepper, everybody's a Pepper. A nice campaign that really kicked off a lot of national exposure for the company. And then that evolved, the oval logo that you see with I'm a Pepper then evolved into the stripe one above. And then let's go on. That then switched over to what kind of looks like a bit of a lightning bolt comet, there we go, trail. And then, let's see. Here we go. You can see that even Popeye was a Pepper, along with Tweety Bird and Fred Flintstone and Sylvester the Cat. Sugar-free Dr. Pepper, and definitely was a big deal. And we'll go on. This logo was introduced in 2007. This particular logo holds special interest for us at the museum because the marketing team that was responsible for the development of this logo spent a couple of days down at the museum going through the collection, really taking a look at the history of the product, what it had been about, and created this logo out of the brand history that we are in charge of keeping for them. We'll go on. So, all of that said, what's collectible? Anything with a Dr. Pepper logo is the short answer to that question. Dr. Pepper collectors are out looking for just about anything that's got that logo on it. You can see here a photograph, lithographs, hats, pins, buttons, necklaces, earrings, watch fobs, and the list goes on. Things with hot Dr. Pepper on them. What do we have on the table over here? Books, stuffed animals, coolers, cut ads out of newspapers and magazines. They have it all. A lot of collectors will specialize in one type of thing. And so there are sugar-free Dr. Pepper collectors out there. They have an attraction to that wonderful blue color. They collect things that are from the very early years that are really some of the most rare things that are out there. Pole signs, shelf talkers, danglers, fan poles, bottle riders, and the list goes on from there. We have a lot of these items in our collection and are ever changing our exhibits to display them, and it is an enjoyable process for us. So let's see, a couple more here. One of the newest things are flash drives. This little guy over here is a flash drive. We now are really focusing on our clothing collection at the museum and have a lot of the t-shirts and hats and route salesman uniforms and soda jerk uniforms. And during the late 70s and early 80s, the I'm a Pepper was definitely a popular thing to collect. And it even goes on to the handmade objects that we even have in our collection. One of the most interesting things that is handmade in our collection, which I don't have a picture of, unfortunately, is a recreation of the old corner drugstore in an ostrich egg. It was handmade by one of our Dr. Pepper collectors and has been out on exhibit several times at the museum. So I think we've about reached the end of my photo collage here. And so I'm open for questions at this point in time. Yes?
Can you give us an order of the bottles, the earliest bottle to the, what the differences are?
Yeah. Very early bottles were hand blown. They would have had a rounded bottom to them. Many of them, especially this is the time of the Artesian Manufacturing and Bottling Company, are going to have a circle A on the bottom of them. And that would have been there on up until the 1920s or so, possibly. This particular bottle is what's called the thief bottle. It would have had a paper label on this side of it, and on the other side it says, if I can even read this one now, we pay for evidence convicting thieves for refilling our bottles, the AMMBC Company, Waco, Texas, and you can sometimes find it with St. Louis, Missouri also, because they had a syrup manufacturing plant starting in 1904 with the World's Fair in St. Louis. So this is one of the early bottles. They then would have moved on to one that would have looked very much like this one here with the script Dr. Pepper on it. It has the King of Beverages slogan with it also. It does have the Artesian Manufacturing Bottling Company, Waco, Texas on it. It still has the Circle A. From there, they would have moved to a Good for Life bottle, very much like this. It is an embossed bottle. It can be embossed or debossed depending on the time. And it's going to have eventually the 1024 on the back of it. Moving on from there, it would have gone to the 1950s logo. Some of these are embossed and debossed, and then they would have moved to the applied color label bottle, which is simply the color on the bottle. ACL, applied color label, talks about how the color was applied to the bottle. Then a 60s bottle with the Bounce P, Dr. Pepper on the back, or the logo again. And then from there, it would have gone on to the 70s logo. And at this point in time, they're introducing the sugar-free Dr. Pepper. So you're going to find the sugar-free bottle and the regular bottle. The regular bottle would have had the red logo, the sugar-free, the blue label. And then as you progress on into late 80s, 90s, you're going to see the emergence of plastic bottles. I didn't bring any examples of the plastic, but I do have the glass bottle with that logo. These are getting harder and harder to find. And then that oval is going to be dropped, and it's going to look very much like this. The color's reversed for the regular Dr. Pepper. And then right here, my Diet Dr. Pepper bottle. Cans get introduced in the 60s. Are the cans still in the car? All right. We can get examples of cans, but we did bring some. They started out with a cone top because they were trying to find ways in which to keep the carbonation pressure inside the can, and so that by the time you got the can, it's not going to be a flat drink. So they were having problems with seams. And so they very quickly went through a variety of shapes and ways of trying to keep the carbonation in the can. So the very first has a cone top, so it looks very much like a bottle. It utilized the same kind of cap. And those are really rare. They didn't do very well. And then, so by the 80s, you finally see pretty much the can the way that it is today. Many times in the 70s, it was a heavier gauge metal. They had to go through a variety of different ways for the closures of the tops too. So I think many of you probably remember the plastic film thing that you had to pull off the top or to puncture it with the church key. So it was about the 80s that the tab that we have today finally emerged. Anybody? Yes?
I have two questions. One, could you explain the divergence from Dr. Pepper and Dublin Dr. Pepper for somebody that doesn't know? And, the second question has to do with objects. Is there a rule of thumb if you have an object that it's worn, but when does it become better to leave it worn or to restore it? Okay.
You might have to remind me of your second question in a minute, because Dublin can be a long story. Dublin was the very first franchise. They got the Artesian Manufacturing and Bottling Company was incorporated in April of 1891 in Waco, Texas. They were at the Old Corner Drugstore and in a variety of locations around downtown Waco until the building that we are in was built in 1906. Now, in October, they gave the first franchise contract to Dublin Bottling Works in Dublin, Texas. And knowing that that was going to be the best way for them to expand their product. Franchises are a significant way in which the soft drink industry has grown across the country. It takes some money to be able to start up your own a bottling plant. It requires a lot of equipment, being able to carbonate water and put it into bottles. There's a cost to getting the bottles, especially at this point in time, because they were returnable bottles, it was glass, it took some investment. And so every little town had one or probably more bottling plants already where they did their own local flavors, and Dublin was that same way. And so Dublin received that very first contract in October of 1891. They continued to have that contract all the way up until about a year and a half ago. They were really significant to the Dr. Pepper community, especially in the 1970s when the entire community soft drink industry pretty much switched over to corn syrup. And they decided to keep utilizing the pure cane sugar. And I think there's probably a lot of people out there that say that pure cane sugar Dr. Pepper tastes a little bit sweeter. They like it a lot better than the corn syrup Dr. Pepper. I will admit, I think that I definitely can taste the difference in the two. And so they really developed a following for their pure cane sugar Dr. Pepper. You could go to Dublin and see it bottled the same way that it had been bottled in the 1940s, which is a really neat experience. I have been out there several times and enjoyed really seeing those machines in operation. And so that was what really became the touch point for Dublin. They were still a bottling facility, and they still have that in operation there as far as I am aware. I haven't been out there in a little while. But due to an issue that the Dr. Pepper Snapple Group had with the franchise operation there, they decided to part ways, and they still do a lot of pure cane sugar bottling there. They have now are doing a root beer called Triple X root beer. I've had that one before, and really like that particular root beer, and that's one of the things that they are doing out there, along with a lot of other smaller brands that they are bringing into that local community there. So it's a really neat place. They have a wonderful collection of Dr. Pepper stuff. We have borrowed from them on occasion for our exhibits at the museum, and it's been really nice working with them out there all these years too. So they'll probably even be at the Collectors Club next week. I can't guarantee you that, but they came last year and still participated in what was going on then. So, okay, second question.
Second question. If you've got an object and it's worn, what's the point where if you want to restore it, is the restoration going to hurt the value because it's not original at that point?
Many times it can. It depends on what you want to use it for. There's a lot of people out there that buy those old vending machines and they completely redo them, restore the paint and everything because they want a nice showpiece in their house or their garage or wherever they're going to put it and still use it. So it really becomes up to you. If it is something extremely rare, like one of the really older pieces of Dr. Pepper, I personally probably wouldn't do anything to it because I think it really would affect the value of it. We do not get into valuing objects at the museum because we are a private nonprofit. We do not assess the value because whoever's donating it to us can take it as a tax write-off. And so we don't want to get into that particular issue with the IRS. The IRS says, no, 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 no. And so we don't do that. And so I don't tend to keep track of values and how a lot of things can affect it because of that. Yes?
Yeah, what would you consider the holy grail of Dr. Pepper artifacts?
The Dr. Pepper Museum. The Artesian Manufacturing and Bottling Company building, built in 1906, national headquarters until the 1920s.
But what about the artifact that someone might stumble across at a flea market in Tyler, and that's not a
And here's my answer to that question. I have a very skewed perspective on it because we have over 100,000 objects in our collection. So I I'm not a good one to answer because I see so many things on a daily basis that to me are just normal things, but to the collectors in general might be a more significant piece.
Then is there something that your museum does not have that would be something that you would like to have?
Personally, there's a couple of lithographs out there from the early 1900s that we don't have in the collection that I think would be really good pieces. We have copies of them, but we don't have the originals. Anybody else?
Do you have this stuff cataloged so that when I go on eBay and I see something that's got Dr. Pepper on it and it's touted as being old, how do I know it's really old?
We do have our objects cataloged in a software database called Past Perfect, but that's just for our use internally. To really many times determine whether it's an original or a reproduction, you'd really have to take a good look at it, because I've got some pieces up here that are reproductions that probably even just sitting out there, probably some Dr. Pepper collectors might not be able to tell unless they just already knew our collection. You really have to get in and take a look at some pieces up close to be able to determine what they are. There are some trays out there that look pretty old, and we have several in our collection, but it's really easy to tell. You just flip them over and they've got paragraphs of writing on the back of them, and you'll know that it's a reproduction piece from the 100th anniversary of Dr. Pepper. They did the company itself did a lot of reproductions in 1985 to celebrate the 100th anniversary. So
those things are labeled somehow so that you know.
Those in particular are, because you'll see the 100th anniversary logo on it somewhere. But there are a couple of collectors out there or other people that, have reproduced some things, but it would take actually looking at them for me to be able to tell many times.
Is there a book that helps with some of the logo information that you talked about today?
There are a couple of books out there on soft drink collecting that'll list a lot of, show a lot of pictures and prices for different years. Petretti's, I believe is the name of it, soft drink collectible book, has a lot of dates and values for objects across the soft drink industry, and they divide it up by cardboards and calendars and thermometers and things like that. And they're a good place to start. If I have a question, many times those are some locations that I go to.
Yes, you said when it first was named, it was called a Waco, and then that was named by who?
Wade Morrison. He was the owner of the Old Corner Drugstore, and he was the one that hired Dr. Alderton to be his pharmacist there.
And that was the one that named it Dr. Pepper?
Mr. Morrison named it Dr. Pepper. Dr. Alderton invented it.
Albertson?
Alderton, A-L-D-E-R-T-O-N.
Yes.
Well, is there a family that's still connected after all these 100 years or so?
No, it is no longer in family hands. It did remain. It's up in the corporate headquarters are now located in Plano, Texas. Out on Legacy Drive, the big Dr. Pepper Snapple group building there. There was a third person who was brought in about 1891 called Robert Lazenby, who had been a beverage chemist. And he had actually created Circle A, which is where the A on the bottom of the bottle comes from. That was the flagship brand for the Artesian Manufacturing and Bottling Company on up past the Spanish-American War. And it was his drink that really made the company a national name. And then Dr. Pepper kind of rode the coattails until the 20s or so, and it had surpassed Circle A by then. But he stayed with the company on through the 1920s, and he was the one that actually brought it to Dallas. They needed more funding and were able to get that in Dallas, unfortunately not in Waco. And his son-in-law then kept the company, ran the company on up to the 1950s, 60s or so, J.B. O'Hara. And so it stayed in the family that long. Unfortunately, the O'Haras had daughters, and those son-in-laws were no longer interested in the company, and it passed off into other hands at that point in time. So right now the company is publicly traded on the stock market, so you can own your own piece of the Dr. Pepper Company. Anybody else? I can go on for hours, and I'm sure you probably aren't willing to listen to me that long. That's what 10 years of working at the Dr. Pepper Museum will do for you. So,
Thank you, Joy.
I drink Dr. Pepper, don't you see? 'Cause it's the perfect taste for me. That original taste, you know, is making peppers everywhere I go. There's boating peppers, toting peppers, cooking peppers, good-looking peppers. Wouldn't you like to be a pepper too? Us peppers are an interesting breed. An original taste is what we need. Ask any pepper and he'll say, only Dr. Pepper tastes that way. There's carrying peppers, marrying peppers, diet peppers, quiet peppers. Wouldn't you